installation, not including the accommodating lines. We take a 3,884, we subtract out the evergreen, which is 1188, we subtract out the two blue keys, which is 480, we subtract out the two hockey creases, which is 80, we subtract that all out and we come up with 2,136 green tile that we're going to need around the perimeter. And then with this grid format, we're able to make dotted lines where all the accommodating lines, because wherever you have a white line and it continues through the border color, you're going to need that color's accommodating or a 2-inch by 10-inch line. So with that, we're able to add up and figured that we need 256 white lines, 4 evergreen lines, 30 bright blue lines, and 158 green lines. And that's how we order our tile. You'd like to start in one corner, and you run a band of approximately 4 tile, go both horizontal and vertical, in 2 directions. And what that does is that lays out or helps you center where the tile is actually going to go. So it's easier to move 2 bands in an L shape that are only 4 tile wide than having to shift a whole court that could essentially weigh 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. So we lay it out according to the design, and that's including all the accommodating lines and all your colors. And once that's lined up, then you can just blow and go. You start on one side and start going from one side to the other with the loops exposed facing the 2 directions that you're going. As you can see, the loops are facing in these 2 directions, and then the tile will just grow out from there. And then you can still make some slight adjustments according to however the temperature is for the day just by hopping the tile over.
How far will you run out when you make your L shape?
Well, go all the way in.
You wouldn't go all the way down one side, would you? Or
Sure.
Would you?
You go all the way. You start at one end, go all the way to the very end, and a tile might be overlapping, so we'll make the adjustment. And then at the other side, you go all the way from side to side and end to end. So full bleed from end to end, side to side. And that's where you can line up your tile. It's still relatively light, can be shifted or pulled over as needed.
Interesting situation right here. We have a sort of an intersection. What happens right there?
Well, when 2 lines...
You really have to pay attention when you're putting this together.
And we lay that on the detail. As a dealer, you provide the detail of the layout for the installer, both the colors and where both the lines go and the accommodating lines. Wherever there's a line, the playing lines, the white playing lines, extends out into the outer color, we have that color's accommodating line, which is a 2-inch wide line, 10 inches long, in this particular application with the SD4 tile, to go a full bleed to the outer edge. And whenever 2 lines intersect, like 2 white lines, then you'll have what's called a filler piece, which is a 2-inch by 2-inch piece where 2 2-inch lines intersect.
In some situations, you might be able to make one of those yourself in a pinch, right?
Right, and that, let's say for some reason you lose the filler or you forget about the filler.
They're so small they can get lost in the shuffle.
Right. You can take a full 10-inch line piece and cut 2 inches off either end, so now you have 2 fillers, but that loses a loop. When you lose the loop, that downgrades the integrity of the tile because now we have only 3 sides connected as opposed to 4.
As far as cutting around some of the areas that you might have to cut around, maybe along an edge or around your basketball unit or your light fixture, what do you use to cut?
Well, as you can see, with all the anchors are inside the edge of the court, we'd like to have the surface go all the way out to the edge of the concrete. So therefore, we're going to have to trim, as you can see, around the basketball hoop, around the rebounder, around the ball containment support posts, around the light post and the net post. All of those are critical. We like to do, depending on the application, round cuts and square cuts, as you can see in some of these applications.
What type of saw would you use?
Sharp utility knife. If it's dull, then you're going to have a tendency to cut your fingers off. A nice sharp utility knife is all you need. The warmer it is, the easier to cut. If it's cool, it's a little harder to cut. But you'll have to trim the loops on the side where the loops are exposed when you're completed on your installation. And you might have some trimming on all 4 sides in order to get the entire surface to square up with the court.
So when laying the tile, remember, have a detailed grid diagram prepared for installers. Use the L pattern approach, completing one end and one side. Loops should be facing out for easiest installation. Hopping the tile will fine-tune the installation. Confirm that basketball key is centered at the hoop. Remember, 2 lines intersecting will require a 2-inch by 2-inch filler. Trim the tile around components with expansion and contraction in mind. As far as painting, what's the procedure there?
Some people in the initial stages might be a little bit shy about painting. We've been painting courts for 4 or 5 years now. And the reason we paint courts is because basketball is king. It's usually, in most instances, the #1 sport that's played on our courts. And when you have a painted line to make it look like a full half court, or in this case a full court key, with the key markings, the perimeter lines, the top of the circle, 3-point arc, all those things are nice and clean when you have it painted. And painting application is multi-stage. We actually lay a masking tape with a tape machine, as you see here. You will notice that the masking on the blue tile, the tape covers the entire blue tile and the gap between the two tile. This is to prevent paint from spilling over into the gap. You'll notice on the other side that the mask rides the ridge, right on the middle of the ridge of the SD4 tile. This allows for a nice clean paint on this side of the ridge and not spillage on the opposite side of the ridge. This particular application of the mask is not using the line tape machine because of lack of depth and room along the baseline with the interference of the ball containment fencing and also the basketball pole itself. This gentleman is rolling the tape, which helps it to attach to the SD4 surface and reduces the propensity for bleeding underneath the tape during the paint application. Okay, what Dave is marking now is what we call the key markings. This is the blocks and the spots and the marks where players would stand when someone is attempting a free throw. We're accurate with our markings. The block is approximately 8 inches by 12, and the marks are 2 inches by 8 inches. There's 1 block and 3 marks. And there are 36 inches between each mark. This is our line tape machine. You can see it has approximately 19 feet 9 inches of extension. It puts down simultaneously 2 rolls of tape. This is our 3-point arc. Dave's now taping the top of the key, which intersects with a 3-point line, to round out the balance of the masking. They're trimming the mask so we can have a solid line connecting the perimeter of the key with the top of the circle line.
But less than
This is a solution of MEK, methyl ethyl ketone, which is a cleaner, essentially. It's very volatile. You don't want to be breathing this stuff too much. But it takes out the impurities in the tile, and the application of the primer, which is next, will be able to adhere to the tile much better. The methyl ethyl ketone can dry right away. So as soon as he's finished doing the rounds of the lines with the MEK, he can put the primer right down. This application is the primer. It goes down prior to painting, right after the MEK. It's second in the stage. You will notice that Dave has on his roller a customized size roller. 2-inch roller is too small, a 3 inch is too big. So he trims them down. He likes it 2 3/4 inch wide. The primer actually etches the surface, and it's critical, very critical, that you do not spill the primer, because when it etches the surface, everything will be able to stick to that area where the primer rests on, including dirt, sand, dust. So it's critical that the primer is not spilled. The primer dries pretty fast. We can start painting within about 15 minutes after the primer application. The paint is a 2-stage aliphatic urethane with an accelerator. Has a certain amount of pot life, which means once you mix it, a 4-to-1 ratio, you have to paint it that day. You can't hold it over time. The paint works really well. It sticks really well. And of course, to wrap up the project, soon after the painting is down, we can strip the mask, which reveals a nice clean line. Just got to be careful. Make sure you don't spill any paint, of course, the paint will only stick to locations where there's primer. So if you do get a little blue paint on the green tile in this application, it will come off very easily with MEK, methyl ethyl ketone.
As far as the weather is concerned, what are some of the things that might stand in the way from the primer procedure? If it's too moist in the air, I mean, is that something that's going to stand in the way of
humidity?
making it effective?
Humidity has a lot of play in that. If your humidity is too high, it's difficult for the mask tape to stick. So make sure you use the right type of masking tape that will stick to the surface prior to painting and application of the primer. Of course, you don't want any moisture falling out of the air. That has a tendency to, make a mess. If it's getting ready or threatening to rain, you don't want to have, a messy bleeding paint job. It's also best to strip the mask just a few minutes after it's painted, because if the paint becomes too dry, when you strip the mask, what's going to happen is that dried paint is attached to the mask, might actually chip it from the painted surface.
And finally, painting the lines. Securely tape all painted areas. Keys lines and 3-point line should all be regulation. Trim tape where lines intersect. Generously apply MEK cleaning solvent. Apply primer with a quality roller and attention to detail. Paint within 15 minutes of priming. Strip tape before paint is completely dry. Allow paint to cure. So there you have it, how to build a successful sport court game court. Dale, any final thoughts on the construction process?
Critical for new dealers is get involved. Be there at the job site when everything's going on. Watch the site be prepped. Watch the concrete go down. Make sure the anchors are there. Be there to check and recheck. Gain from the experience that you'll get over the years. Gain from the experience of those who are doing that particular work. And have some staying power. Stick with it. Be involved. Be an integral part of it. Do everything you can to stay in tune.
And if they don't know, they should ask a question, right?
Nothing wrong with asking questions. Just stupid mistakes if you don't ask questions.
All right, Dale, thank you very much. Dale, by the way, a veteran of over 1,000 sport court game courts. No reason why you can't do the same. Good luck. Get into the game.